The Life of Tomura Shigaraki, My Hero Academia. Tomura Shigaraki, real name Tenko Shimura, is the leader of the League of Villains after his master All For One's defeat and arrest, and the primary antagonist of the series. He made his first major appearance as one of the main antagonists of the U.S.J. arc. Like the rest of the League, his goal is to kill All Might, the symbol of peace, thus destroying the society he represents, and to create a new one with a new form of justice in his own image. Later on, Tomura changed his goal to instead destroy society altogether rather than reshape it. He soon merged his organization and the Metal Liberation Army to form the Paranormal Liberation Front, becoming its Grand Commander and later inheriting the All For One Quirk. Welcome to the Amagi. In today's video, we're going over the life of Tomura Shigaraki. Before we begin, we publish a new video every day, so be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. The Amagi's reach stretches beyond just this channel, so if you're a fan of us, please consider subscribing to our other channels like the Amagi 2 and following us on all of our social media accounts. Help us reach our goal of passing 100,000 followers on all of our accounts by the end of the year. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Background. Tomura was born under the name Tenko Shimura to Nao Shimura and Kotaro Shimura, and had an older sister named Hana Shimura. When Tenko was a child, he had a fascination with heroes, but his father didn't tolerate his acts and often punished him for them by putting him outside. Tenko didn't seem to have a quirk, but he suffered from unknown physical changes to his body. However, his mother and grandparents were always there for him and encouraged him, as did his sister, who showed him a picture of their father and grandmother, who they learned was a hero. Unfortunately, Tenko's father discovered this and punished his son, while also shaming heroes for protecting others and abandoning their families. Tenko's suffering was watched by his other relatives, who he begged for help, but they could only witness it in horror. While outside, Tenko confided in the family dog of how he hated everyone for leaving him to suffer. As he was clutching his dog, Tenko's decay quirk activated, causing the dog to crumble in his hands. Afterward, Hana came outside to apologize to Tenko for not standing up for him, but proceeds to run away in fear after seeing their dog dead next to him. When Tenko tries to reach for her, he ends up disintegrating her by accident. Tenko's grandparents and mother ran outside to see what was happening, and Tenko ended up killing them when his decay quirk spread in his panic. When Tenko's father came outside and saw the chaos, Tenko ran to him for help, but his scared father would grab some garden tools to protect himself. This time, an enraged Tenko charged at his father with full intent to kill him and touched his face. Ultimately, the spreading decay ended up destroying the entire house. Tenko would relish in ending his father's abuse. After the death of his family, an orphan Tenko was left to fend for himself on the streets. People who passed by never offered to help him because they assumed that a hero would take care of it, leaving him to be ignored. It didn't help that they were also unnerved by his disturbing appearance and pretended not to notice him. Tenko began to think that this was punishment for his actions, as the memories slowly faded into the recesses of his mind. Eventually, a man named All For One saved him, blaming society for the reason he wasn't saved sooner. All For One used this incident as a means of stimulating Tenko's newfound hatred for heroes and began grooming him as his adoptive son. Tenko was given his own room by All For One, and Kyudai Garaki gifted the young boy with the disembodied hands of his deceased family members. All For One taught Tenko to embrace the urge he felt whenever he felt it, and Tenko did just that by killing two thugs and added their hands to his look. All For One later renamed him Tomura Shigaraki. All For One elaborated that Tomura came from the words Tomurao, which means to mourn, while Shigaraki is All For One's real last name, and raised him as part of the League of Villains to eventually become his successor of the organization. U.S.J. arc. Soon after, All Might begins teaching at UA High School. Tomura uses the media as cover and destroys the school's barricade. Once inside, Tomura steals All Might's itinerary and plans to attack in the coming days. When Class 1A begins their rescue training at the unforeseen simulation joint, the League of Villains invades the facility through Kurogiri's warp gate. Tomura is disappointed to notice that All Might isn't at the facility even though the schedule said he'd be teaching the class. Eraserhead attacks the villains to give the students a chance to escape. Tomura commends Eraserhead's skill and says it's annoying when heroes live up to their name. Kurogiri confronts 13 and Class 1A and warps them to the separate areas of the U.S.J. where the villains can fight them. Eraserhead defeats the majority of the villains still in the central plaza. Tomura figures out that his hair gives way when he's using the erasure quirk and rushes him while counting the intervals between each erasure. Eraserhead notices Tomura is the final boss and sends his capturing weapon at him. Tomura catches the scarf, and the Erasure hero elbows him in the torso. Tomura blocks Eraserhead's elbow and disintegrates it using his decay quirk. He taunts Eraserhead not to overwork himself or else he might just fall apart. Eraserhead forces Tomura back and the other villains attack him. Tomura mentions that Eraserhead's quirk works better in covert ops rather than against big groups. Nomu suddenly crushes the hero, and Tomura points out that the bioengineered anti-symbol of peace is actually the final boss. Tomura taunts Eraserhead by admitting that his quirk is powerful, but it's weak against Nomu's overwhelming might. Kurogiri warps back to Tomura's position and reveals that although 13 has been incapacitated, a UA student managed to escape the facility to get reinforcements. This greatly irritates Tomura, and he starts to scratch his neck. He starts to give up because their plans are dashed if dozens of pro heroes show up to stop them. He decides that before the pros arrive, they should destroy All Might's will by killing his students. Tomura swiftly confronts Izuku Midoriya, Tsuyu Asui, and Minoru Mineta, who are watching from afar. Tomura nearly touches Tsuyu's face and kills her, but Eraserhead erases his quirk in time. Tomura commends him before Nomu defeats him, and Izuku attacks Tomura with a maxed out smash attack. Nomu takes the impact of Izuku's punch and absorbs the shockwave. Tsuyu tries to save Izuku from Nomu's clutches, and Tomura attacks her. They all stop in place when All Might suddenly bursts into the facility. All Might immediately saves Eraserhead and the students in a flash. He also knocks Tomura's mask from his face. Tomura picks it up and laments All Might's speed. Soon after, he realizes that All Might isn't as fast as he used to be, and smiles. All Might tries to strike Tomura with a Carolina Smash, but Nomu impedes his path and absorbs the attack. All Might engages Nomu in battle, and Tomura boasts of Nomu's shock absorption ability. All Might tries to slam Nomu, and Kurogiri traps him halfway through a warp gate. Before he can cut All Might in half, Izuku rushes to his aid. Kurogiri intercepts him, but Katsuki Bakugo suddenly arrives on the battlefield and hits the warp villain with an explosion. Shoto Todoroki freezes Nomu, and Eiichiro Kirishima tries to attack Tomura, but he evades. Tomura admits he's impressed by the students and insults Kurogiri for getting pinned down by Katsuki. He orders Nomu to recover, and it does so by breaking off its frozen limbs. Tomura explains that super regeneration is another one of Nomu's quirks, and then orders it to retrieve Kurogiri. Nomu attacks Katsuki, but All Might absorbs the attack. Tomura claims that his actions are justified because All Might and the students are government-sponsored instruments of violence. All Might sees right through Tomura's guise and says that he's only doing it because he enjoys causing destruction. Tomura admits that All Might has figured him out. Tomura attacks the students, but All Might and Nomu clash, and the shockwaves keep everyone else away from each other. The symbol of peace channels all his power and defeats Nomu with 300 mighty blows. Irate, Tomura scratches his neck and says that All Might cheated. Tomura insults All Might and worries that his power hasn't decreased after all. He starts to panic, but Kurogiri encourages him to go on the offensive because Nomu has clearly weakened him. Tomura agrees that they've come too far to run, and they rush the weakened hero. Izuku uses an incredible burst of speed to intercept the villains, surprising Tomura. Tomura warps his hands through Kurogiri's body to try and destroy Izuku's face. His hand gets abruptly shot from afar by Snipe. The pro heroes arrive at the U.S.J with Tenya and attack the League of Villains. Tomura gets shot several times until Kurogiri protects him. 13 tries to capture them from a distance, but Kurogiri warps them away in time. Before they disappear, Tomura warns All Might that his days are numbered. Kurogiri warps them both back to their hideout. Tomura lies on the floor bleeding and injured, asking his master how their plan went so sideways. The master replies that the League of Villains weren't as prepared as they needed to be, and they underestimated UA High. Tomura mentions there was a UA student who was fast like All Might, and stopped them from killing the symbol of peace. The master tells Tomura to calm down, and they need to gather villains to their cause. He says that next time, Tomura will show the world the horror of his existence. UA Sports Festival Arc. While recuperating from his injuries, Tomura watches the UA Sports Festival on a small screen. Izuku wins the obstacle race, and Tomura notices that he's the same student who tried to save All Might during the villain attack. During the finals, Izuku faces off with Shoto, another student who tried to save All Might. Tomura's master tells him to watch their duel closely, because the two of them could grow into formidable adversaries to the League of Villains. Tomura replies that he's not afraid of a couple kids, and tries not to make him laugh. Versus Hero Killer Arc. The Master advises the League of Villains to recruit the infamous hero killer, Stain, during the height of his popularity. Kurogiri warps him from Hosu City to their hideout. Stain surmises that Tomura and Kurogiri are the ones who attacked UA, and that they want him to join their party. The hero killer asks about the League of Villains' goal, and Tomura says that right now, he just wants to destroy anything that he hates. He shows Stain a picture of Izuku from the sports festival, and Stain isn't amused. He regrets having allowed himself to be swayed, and says the League of Villains have nothing to offer him. Tomura is surprised when Stain says he's the type of person Stain despises most of all. He draws his blades, and Kurogiri asks the master if this was a bad idea. The master replies that it's good because it will force Tomura to reflect on himself and stimulate his growth. Tomura and Stain come to blows over their opposing views. Stain pins Tomura to the ground and cuts his shoulder open with one of his knives. Stain tells him that without conviction, Tomura will always be an aimless weakling. Tomura orders Kurogiri to warp Stain away, but the hero killer has already paralyzed him with his blood curdle quirk. Stain says petty villains and false heroes are targets for his purge, and nearly cuts the hand off Tomura's face. Tomura stops him in time and decays his knife while threatening to kill him if he touches that hand. Tomura claims he doesn't have anything as dramatic as a conviction or creed. However, he admits that he desires to kill All Might and crush the society that worships him. He stands up and tells the hero killer that he was just starting to get over his injuries and that the villains don't have a healer in their party. Stain admits he misjudged Tomura and that he does have a sprout of conviction in him. Tomura demands that Stain leave, and the hero killer reveals that he attacked to expose Tomura's true motivations. The hero killer says he'll allow Tomura's sprout of conviction to grow. Tomura calls him crazy and says that he can't join the league, but Kurogiri pleads with him otherwise. Stain asks they return him to Hosu City so he can purge the remaining false heroes. Tomura follows him to Hosu, and Stain explains that he's going to reform the city. Kurogiri commends his efforts, and Stain says he's the kind of guy who would understand. This annoys Tomura, and he says he's tired of Stain picking on him. Stain leaves to continue his purge, and Kurogiri explains that Stain's methods are effectively making heroes work harder. Tomura mocks Stain's ideology, and states that he can't get along with the hero killer, so he'll destroy him instead. Tomura requests 3 Nomu from his master to destroy Stain, and Kurogiri warps them to Hosu. Tomura states that he'll destroy the big bad hero killer's pride, prestige, and self-worth. The Nomu attack Hosu City and wreak random havoc. Tomura and Kurogiri watch from atop a water tower, and the former comments that the Nomu make great playthings. Kurogiri asks if he's going to fight, and Tomura replies that of course he isn't because he's injured, and that's why he brought the Nomu. Tomura claims that by the end of the night, the world will have forgotten about the hero killer. Tomura uses binoculars to watch as each of the Nomu are defeated. He's especially angry when Stain kills the winged Nomu and expresses his irritation that nothing is going his way. After the remaining Nomu are arrested, Tomura disintegrates his binoculars out of anger. Kurogiri asks Tomura if the results of the attack on Hosu are to his satisfaction, but Tomura replies that the results depend on tomorrow's headlines. Kurogiri teleports them back to the hideout. The news of the Hosu incident and Stain's arrest take over the media. Tomura reads the newspaper, and it mainly publishes Stain's feats and how his name will go down in history. Tomura is aggravated that the hero killer has managed to completely overshadow the Nomu attack. He throws out the newspaper and realizes that his effort to destroy the hero killer's name has completely backfired. Final Exams Arc. At the League of Villains hideout, Tomura sits at a bar across from Kurogiri staring at his photo of Izuku. Kurogiri asks if Tomura is curious about the boy. Giran interrupts and enters the hideout to greet Tomura. He says that the League of Villains are the talk of the criminal underworld since Stain's defeat. Tomura destroys his picture of Izuku and asks who Giran brought with him. Dabi and Himiko Toga enter the room and greet Tomura. Dabi insults him by calling his appearance gross, and Himiko emphatically pleads to let her join the League of Villains. Tomura doesn't even give them a chance and tells Kurogiri to get rid of the duo. He claims he can tell they're the type of people he hates because Himiko is crazy and Dabi is rude. Kurogiri pleads with him to give them a chance because Giran is so respected in the underworld. Giran introduces Himiko as a girl who's a suspect in a string of murders. She asks to join the League, and Tomura responds that she's crazy. Dabi doubts the League is dedicated to the hero killer's mission, and Tomura tells him to grow up and introduce himself properly. Dabi keeps his name hidden and only says that he needs to carry out the hero killer's will. Tomura says he's tired of hearing about Stain and gets angry. He attacks both of the recruits, but Kurogiri intervenes. Kurogiri reminds Tomura that the villains must increase their numbers and that using Stain's ideology is the perfect way to recruit new villains while they're in the spotlight. Tomura storms out of the room, and Kurogiri believes he left to find answers. Tomura dresses in civilian attire and finds Izuku at the Kiyashi Ward shopping mall. He approaches Izuku and asks for an autograph. He talks about Izuku's small fortune of fame during the sports festival and Hosu incident. Izuku says that the man sure knows a lot, and Tomura responds by revealing that they've run into each other time and time again, and it can't be a coincidence. Tomura wraps his hand around Izuku's throat and reveals his face with a wicked smile. Tomura ventured to the mall to clear his mind, but he's haunted by the words of the hero killer. He believes that people are ignorant for smiling while people somewhere are dying. He tries to understand how Stain gained sympathizers when they're both just trying to destroy things they hate. Wanting to learn the difference between them, Tomura asks Izuku to sit down and talk. He orders Izuku to calm down, and if he tries to resist, well, then he'll turn his throat into dust and kill nearby civilians afterwards. Izuku agrees to talk, and they sit down. Tomura says that he hates everything, but Stain irritates him the most at the moment. The hero killer has managed to upstage both the U.S.J. and the Hosu incidents, and Tomura can't understand why. He asks what Izuku thinks the difference is between the two villains. Izuku replies that he can understand the hero killer because he's inspired by All Might. Stain's not like Tomura because he always held true to his beliefs, and didn't destroy things just because, like Tomura does. Overjoyed, Tomura reveals Izuku's words have helped him realize something important. Tomura says that their connection with All Might is why he hates Izuku and Stain so much. Tomura believes All Might is the reason people can smile ignorantly, even though the world of quirks is so dangerous. He gets excited and chokes Izuku harder, while thanking him for helping him come to this realization. Stain's ideology and convictions have become a stepping stone for Tomura's growth. Suddenly, Ochako appears and asks what's happening. Izuku yells for Ochako to stay back, and then Tomura lets him go. Tomura gets up and walks away, but Izuku asks him what All For One is after. Tomura replies that he doesn't know, but adds that the next time he meets Izuku, he will likely kill him. As Tomura leaves, he thinks about how he's had a creed and ideals from the beginning, but he just didn't know. The only difference is, now he knows what he's working towards. He desires a world without All Might, where the villains can reveal how fragile justice and peace really is. Forest Training Camp Arc. With the League of Villains strengthened with a new creed and new recruits, Tomura sends the Vanguard Action Squad to attack UA's training camp. He remains behind at the hideout and stacks some playing cards while speaking to Kurogiri about how his master was easily able to figure out where the training camp was being held. Tomura agrees with Kurogiri that it was worth having the new recruits on standby. Girin enters the hideout and confirms the Black Market Union will have supplies for the new team to support the attack. He claims the Union accepted Tomura's unreasonable request because everyone in the underworld has high expectations for the League of Villains. Girin states that the villains hiding in darkness will rise up and profits will rise for brokers like himself. Tomura replies that soon Girin will be so busy he won't be able to keep up. Girin leaves and Tomura states with a wicked smile that all his pieces and prey have been lined up, so it's time to begin the games. After the Vanguard Action Squad invasion commences, Kurogiri asks Tomura if the team will be okay without him. Tomura compares their attack on the U.S.J. to an RPG where they challenge the final boss at level 1. Instead, Tomura should be trying to use all his pieces to break through the higher ranks of his enemies first. In order to do that, he needs to create fractures on Hero Society. Tomura claims it doesn't matter if the Vanguard Action Squad succeeds, because just their presence will scare the heroes. Kurogiri asks if they're just sacrificial pawns, and Tomura rebuffs his claim. Tomura believes they're all strong comrades he can count on because he and Kurogiri are not the only ones oppressed by society's rules. Hideout Raid Arc. After the Vanguard Action Squad return from their completed mission, Katsuki is restrained and strapped to a chair. Tomura talks to Katsuki and asks him to become his comrade, but Katsuki vehemently tells him to drop the small talk and die since he wants to be a hero. After Katsuki and the League of Villains watch a video clip of UA's public apology, Tomura understands why society is criticizing UA for their failure, and that's because the current Hero Society is not just. Spinner agrees that the current Hero Society isn't just, since the modern heroes are only doing their job for compensation and not out of selflessness. Tomura explains that the League of Villains are fighting for a just society, and intends to win this battle. Tomura orders Dabi to remove Katsuki's restraints, although Dabi is unsure since Katsuki might attack. Tomura wants to treat Katsuki as an equal, and is aware that Katsuki knows he has no possibility of winning. Dabi has twice removed the restraints. As Twice removes the restraints, Mr. Compress apologizes to Katsuki for forcibly kidnapping him, and explains that the League of Villains are not just a group of hoodlums perpetuating crimes, nor did they casually abduct him. He goes on by saying that everyone in the League of Villains is shackled by the current society, and hopes that Katsuki understands their discrimination. Katsuki's restraints are removed. As Tomura approaches Katsuki, Katsuki attacks Tomura with his explosions. Katsuki tells the League of Villains that it's pointless to try and make him change his mind, as he's already been won over by the way All Might looks when he wins. Katsuki says that from the beginning he's dreamed of becoming a hero and surpassing All Might, and nothing they say will change that. The smoke from Katsuki's explosion clears, and Tomura sees that the hand on his face has been blown off as a result of Katsuki's attack, but he's silenced when Tomura fiercely glares, which stops Kurogiri and makes Katsuki tense. After picking up his hand and putting it on his face, Tomura understands that Katsuki won't be convinced to join them with mere words alone, and realizes Katsuki's importance, and decides to ask for the force of his teacher All For One to help him convince Katsuki. All For One, who has been watching Tomura on his computer, commends his apprentice for his wise decision. Tomura orders Mr. Compress and Kurogiri to use their quirks on Katsuki again. Suddenly, All Might breaks in and Kamui Wood swings in and restrains Tomura along with the other League of Villains with his lacquered chain prison. Tomura is obviously annoyed that their hideout was discovered so easily after everything they did to capture Katsuki. Seeing that he has no choice, Tomura orders Kurogiri to bring in all of the Nomus. However, Kurogiri isn't able to since the Nomus are not at the portals, much to Tomura's surprise. All Might criticizes Tomura for underestimating the pro-heroes, the police force, and the unwavering spirit of youth. All Might declares that it's game over for Tomura and his League of Villains. Tomura refutes All Might's claims and says that it's the beginning for the League of Villains, and they'll extinguish the society All Might has created. Tomura orders Kurogiri to create portals so that they can escape. However, Kurogiri's fainted due to Edshot using his quirk to paper-thin his body enough to enter Kurogiri's body and knock him out from the inside. Gran Torino asks Tomura the location of All For One. Tomura becomes silent and begins reminiscing his past. The flashback of his childhood enrages Tomura, causing Tomura to scream out his hatred for All Might. Suddenly, mysterious black liquid appears out of thin air with Nomus appearing out of the phenomenon, which surprises the League of Villains and the pro-heroes. The dozens of Nomus cause pandemonium for the pro-heroes and the police force. Tomura realizes that what's transpiring is the work of his teacher, All For One. Tomura, along with Kurogiri and the Vanguard Action Squad, are teleported by the black liquid to the League of Villains' destroyed warehouse where All For One is. All For One sees that his apprentice, Tomura, has failed again. However, All For One is neither angry nor disappointed with Tomura and encourages Tomura to try again since he still has the Vanguard Action Squad and Katsuki, who he deemed important. All For One implores Tomura to continue trying as many times as he likes, since everything is for his sake. Suddenly, All Might appears and clashes with All For One. All For One creates a huge blast wave that sends All Might flying. All For One orders Tomura to escape along with Katsuki and comments that his black liquid warping quirk won't help Tomura and the League of Villains escape. All For One uses a quirk that forcefully activates Kurogiri's warp gate, which causes a portal to open. Suddenly, All Might reappears onto the battlefield, refusing to allow All For One to escape, and charges at him. Before heading into battle, All For One tells Tomura that he can still grow stronger. All For One and All Might clash again. Mr. Compress uses his quirk on the unconscious Dabi and tells Tomura that they should escape while they can. The League of Villains prepares to take Katsuki while Katsuki prepares for battle. As Himiko, Twice, and Mr. Compress try to take Katsuki, who fends them off with explosions, Izuku along with Eijiro and Tenya appear in the sky. Eijiro yells at Katsuki to grab his hand. Tomura attempts to stop Katsuki, but Katsuki uses his explosion to launch himself towards Eijiro and grabs his hand. Tomura, the Vanguard Action Squad, and All Might are surprised that Izuku, Eijiro, and Tenya were in the area as well. Spinner, Kenji, and Mr. Compress hatch a plan to retrieve Katsuki, but it's ruined due to Mount Lady's interference. Spinner and Kenji attempt to repeat the plan using Twice, but Gran Torino blitzes them and knocks them out. Before Tomura can attack Gran Torino, he, along with the Vanguard Action Squad, are magnetically pulled into Kurogiri's warp gate. The Vanguard Action Squad are forcefully sucked into Kurogiri's warp gate and are teleported away. As he's being sucked into the warp gate, Tomura calls out to his teacher, concerned for his safety. Before Tomura teleports away, All For One tells Tomura to continue the fight. Tomura and the unconscious Kurogiri are teleported away by the warp gate, causing the portal to disperse. Provisional Hero License Exam Arc. After All For One is arrested and All Might retires, Tomura goes into hiding and orders the League of Villains to disperse so that it makes it easier for them to hide from the police force while also ordering them to find new villains to join the League. In his new hideout, Tomura is sitting in the dark while Mr. Compress speaks to Himiko over the phone. Eventually, most of the League of Villains, except Dabi and Spinner, gather together again, with Twice bringing a potential new villain to join them: Overhaul. Shie Hassaikai Arc. Overhaul enters the League of Villains hideout but is unimpressed with Tomura and his members as well as his unclean hideout. Overhaul explains to the League of Villains that with All For One's downfall, someone will eventually become the next ruler of the underworld. However, Tomura replies that he will become the next underworld ruler after he gathers more members and crushes the current hero society. Overhaul asks Tomura if he has a plan, to which Tomura responds that he thought Overhaul wanted to join them. Overhaul is disappointed that Tomura doesn't have a plan to achieve his objective, and laments that he wasted the potential of Stain, Muscular, and Moonfish. Overhaul reveals that he wants the League of Villains to join him so that he can teach them the proper way to run an organization and use them to gain financial capital so that he can get one step closer to becoming the next underworld ruler. As Tomura orders Overhaul to leave, Magne takes offense to his proposal and magnetizes Overhaul, bringing him into her range. Magne hits Overhaul on the head with her weapon, to which Overhaul retaliates by touching Magne. Overhaul's physical contact causes Magne to explode, much to the League of Villains' shock. Overhaul blames the League for throwing the first punch, commenting on his dislike of blood. Mr. Compress charges forward and touches Overhaul, but his Compress quirk doesn't activate due to previously being shot in the arm with a bullet capable of disarming quirks. Overhaul is enraged at being touched and explodes Mr. Compress's left arm. Furious, Tomura dashes to Overhaul and prepares to decay him. There's another shot against Tomura, but it misses, and Overhaul quickly calls for one of his men to shield him, and Tomura's hand comes into contact with Overhaul's subordinate, causing him to disintegrate. Suddenly, Overhaul's other subordinate appears. Himiko and Twice want to kill Overhaul for murdering Magne, but Tomura, seeing that both of their organizations have suffered casualties, refuses their request. As Overhaul exits, he throws a business card at Tomura's feet and tells him to call him again after he's calmed down and thought about the organization he wishes to build. After the Shie Hassaikai left, Tomura recalls All For One's advice and even considers Overhaul's words to formulate a plan. Next time they meet, Tomura will demand a lot of repayment. After their initial meeting, Tomura calls Overhaul, interested in expanding the influence of the League of Villains in trade of allowing Overhaul and the Shie Hassaikai to use the reputation of their name. Tomura is still wary of Overhaul, however, and only agrees to allow him to use the League of Villains' reputation if he learned the details of his plan. This request angers Chronostasis and Mimic of the Shie Hassaikai, and they begin to threaten Tomura. He meets their threats with an equal anger, expressing that their lives were not equal to that of the deceased Magne. Once Overhaul orders Chrono and Mimic to calm down, Tomura once again questions him about the bullet that can disable quirks. After Overhaul tells Tomura of his plan, he sets up a game of shogi, questioning if Tomura had ever played it before. Upon Tomura's disapproval of playing while in discussion, Overhaul uses the opportunity to teach him how to appreciate the game. He uses the board to make a deal with Tomura, intent on having Twice and Himiko or Kurigiri as temporary transfers. Tomura accuses Overhaul of wanting to chip away the mobility of the League of Villains, declaring that those Overhaul wants are vital to the League of Villains. Overhaul responds, stating that they must begin to build trust, and that the League of Villains and the Shie Hassaikai still have bad blood. Tomura gives in to Overhaul's request, trading Himiko and Twice to the Shie Hassaikai as temporary transfers. Upon telling the League of Villains, Twice is in disbelief at the thought of teaming up with the Shie Hassaikai. Tomura, growing tired at repeating himself, states that Overhaul's plan is promising and that Himiko and Twice are now Yakuza. When Tomura begins to explain Himiko and Twice's next movements, the latter loudly questions if Tomura has lost his mind. Twice rants that Overhaul and his Shie Hassaikai murdered Magne and took off Mr. Compress's arm. He states that his own carelessness led the Shie Hassaikai to the League of Villains. In a fit of tears, Twice takes off his mask and tells Tomura that he and Himiko are humans as well. Twice questions just what the members of the League of Villains are to Tomura. Himiko then explains her motivation about joining the League, and that, inspired by Stain, she wishes to make the world easier to live in her own way, and that if there's any way to do that, she would try. Himiko then hovers a knife over Tomura's left shoulder, asking why she and Twice have to do such a painful, unpleasant thing. Tomura, taking off the hand that covers his face, tells a shocked Himiko and Twice that it's for the sake of he and the both of them. He continues, stating that the Shie Hassaikai wish to hamper the mobility of the League, win the both of them over, and that they don't view the League of Villains as their equals. Tomura then reminds Twice that he told him to take responsibility for his actions, and that this is the way to do it, stating that he believes in them. After Overhaul's defeat at the hands of the heroes, Tomura, Dabi, Mr. Compress, and Spinner, with the help of Himiko, are able to locate the police transporting the apprehended Overhaul. A policeman soon recognizes Tomura aboard the truck, with Dabi and Mr. Compress standing beneath him in the cargo hold. Spinner, who's driving the truck, questions what attacking the police has to do with creating a true hero society. Tomura responds, telling him that it's a necessary sacrifice. Dabi then uses his quirk to generate a vortex of black flames, aiming it at the police car. But to Dabi's surprise, the car is covered by the sand hero Snatch. Telling Spinner to decelerate their vehicle, Tomura jumps, attacking the hero. Held by a cloud of sand, Tomura recognizes Snatch's quirk as his natural opposite. Mr. Compress releases a large rock under the police car, launching it into the air and helping Tomura escape from the sand hero's grasp and directly onto the patrol car. Using his quirk, Tomura makes the vehicle crash as the other police cars collide due to Mr. Compress's rock. Snatch uses his quirk to secure the safety of the police officers, but then he's attacked by Dabi, who throws flames at him. As the flames engulf the hero, Mr. Compress compresses the top half of Snatch, with Dabi stating that he believes the hero will die. Tomura, taking Overhaul out of the police car, mocks him on his failure and states that he hates him because of his arrogance. Overhaul expects Tomura has come to kill him, but what Tomura plans is much more sadistic. He lets Mr. Compress pay Overhaul back for the loss of his arm by removing his arm with his quirk. Tomura checks the contents of the container but sees that there are 2 boxes, wondering which one has the finished product, but sees that it doesn't matter. Chisaki demands that Tomura give the container back. Tomura calls Chisaki a hypocrite, noting the irony in Chisaki's plan to erase a quirk when he himself uses a quirk to achieve that plan and touches Chisaki's right forearm, which begins to disintegrate. Chisaki becomes worried, seeing the decay begin to spread across his arm, threatening to disintegrate his entire body. But Tomura takes out a knife, which he uses to amputate his arm, preventing him from dying. With both of his arms torn off, he's now incapable of activating his quirk. Tomura proceeds to taunt him for now being the helpless and quirkless man, the very thing he wanted others to be. Tomura gloats at having obtained Chisaki's life's work, and laughs in his face with the knowledge that the League of Villains will be the next overlords, not him. And instead of dying, he gets to live, powerless and looking on with envy while it happens. Chisaki is horrified by Tomura's actions and can only scream in frustration and horror as Shuichi reminds Tomura that reinforcements are on the way. Tomura, Dabi, and Atsuhiro leave the wreckage, with Tomura declaring that they will be the next rulers of the underworld. Meta Liberation Army Arc. Less than a month before the hero Billboard chart JP, the League of Villains is in a sorry state. They're barely scrapping by with no funds and have resorted to stealing from other criminal groups. Tomura leads Spinner, Twice, Compress, and Himiko to the house of the Creature Rejection clan, where they interrupt a religious meeting. The villains rudely start searching through the church for items of value. The clansmen demand the villains leave and rush at them. Tomura grabs one of the men by his head and tells him they'll leave once they're done. As the man disintegrates and the villains slaughter the other men, Tomura states that the clan shouldn't have intervened if they didn't want guests overstaying their welcome. The group hardly finds anything to sell and they return to a rundown building where they hide out. Irritated, Spinner questions Tomura how long the League will live in filth. Tomura simply replies until their job is done, and Compress adds that they'd likely live much more lavishly had they cooperated with the Hassaikai. Dabi rejoins the group and Tomura recalls that it's been about a month since Kurogiri was captured by the police. The League also hasn't had contact with All For One's personal doctor since All For One was defeated. Once again, Spinner asks Tomura where the League is going. He explains that he was inspired by Stain to live with a new purpose, but the League of Villains aren't going anywhere. Before Tomura can give a clear answer, a great rumbling shakes the hideout. Tomura and the others go outside where a giant breaks through the ground while asking for All For One's successor. Tomura recognizes this as the power Kurogiri had alluded to. The giant claims he devotes himself to All For One and demands that Tomura prove he's worthy. The League of Villains is easily overpowered and the Titan begins to wail and cry, upset at how weak Tomura has proven to be. A familiar voice echoes from the radio and Tomura realizes it's All For One's doctor. The doctor asks how Tomura and his allies have been, and the latter sarcastically replies that they're fine. The giant crushes the hideout and cries out that he can't accept his master's successor. Tomura asks why, and the doctor introduces the assailant as Gigantomachia, one of All For One's former bodyguards. All For One put Gigantomachia into hiding shortly after picking up Tomura, all so his dreams could live on. A recording of All For One's voice plays from Gigantomachia's radio, soothing the giant into docility. Tomura claims he doesn't want this gift, and the doctor tells him to grow up. He transports all of the League into his secret laboratory, housing about a dozen high-end Nomu. Tomura says he's been seeking out the doctor to reproduce the quirk killer bullets. The doctor introduces himself as Daruma Ujiko and reveals to Tomura that he brought the villains to his lair out of respect for All For One. However, this doesn't mean Dr. Ujiko will aid the League of Villains. He believes Tomura has accomplished nothing and must prove he's worthy. He asks Tomura what he and his band of young villains plan on showing him. Tomura can't remember much before meeting All For One, yet every time he equips his family, Tomura's rage boils out of control. He recalls meeting All For One and the doctor revealing the remains of his family that he unintentionally murdered using a rare quirk never before seen. Young Tomura's emotions ran out of control, but his new master promised to teach him how to direct those negative feelings. The fragments of his past are buried inside a hole in Tomura's heart that acts as an endless source of rage. Tomura believes that no matter what, he will always have this weight on his heart, and that's why he hates everything. So in Tomura's eyes, why not destroy everything? Tomura promises to show the doctor the beautiful horizon lying beyond the destruction of everything. Entertained, Dr. Ujiko agrees to help make Tomura's childish dreams come true. Himiko asks if he plans on destroying what she loves, but Tomura says his allies are exceptions. The doctor claims Tomura passed his test with flying colors and is impressed by how much he's grown. He plans on helping the League using the high-end Nomu and other research he's been preparing for Tomura. The doctor still believes the League is weak and they need to prove themselves. They won't receive his full support until Tomura gets Gigantomachia to submit. Tomura states the doctor has provided them with a long enough tutorial. Dabi refuses to help as he's on the verge of recruiting new allies. Tomura approves and says he's excited to see who Dabi brings back. The doctor recruits Dabi to help test one of the high-ends, and Tomura asks to be warped back to the giant. Using Johnny, the doctor warps everyone except Dabi back to Gigantomachia. Tomura claims the true king has returned and challenges Gigantomachia with his newfound confidence, while the giant gladly accepts his challenge. For the next month and a half into mid-December, Tomura fights Gigantomachia for 48 hours and 44 minutes straight before the giant rests for 3 hours. Tomura has hardly slept himself, but as his life dances in the hands of a giant, all he can do is smile. The giant has yet to accept Tomura, but after their most recent fight, Tomura truly believes Machia is slowing down and he'll rein him in soon. Twice receives a call from Giran, but it turns out to be someone else entirely. The mysterious voice tells the League to check the news, where they find out that Giran's fingers and personal items have been left in 5 different places where the League has appeared. The man over the phone introduces himself as Redestro, Grand Commander of the Metal Liberation Army. Tomura says he's tired of old school groups like the Liberation Army and the Yakuza popping out of the underworld. Redestro explains that they have Giran alive and that the army desires to destroy the status quo and allow people to use their quirks freely. Tomura tells Redestro and his merry band of revolutionaries to liberate Giran and call back later after he's done dealing with Machia. Redestro commends Giran's resistance and makes Tomura regret his comment. The Grand Commander boasts his army has 116,516 warriors ready to be called into action. He also claims to have a satellite camera locked on the villains and threatens to call the top heroes on them. Tomura sarcastically thanks him for the warning and asks what the Detnerat CEO is really after. Redestro explains that only Destro can be credited with the revolution that changes society. Therefore, the League of Villains must be eliminated to signal the rebirth of the Liberation Army. As a declaration of war, Tomura is given the choice to bring the League to Deka City to face the Metal Liberation Army, or do nothing and be captured by the heroes. If the League of Villains wishes to see Giran free, they must go to Aichi Prefecture in the next hour. Compress questions the League's next move and twice emphatically demands they save Giran. Tomura removes an erratic Twice's mask to shut him up and tells everyone he has a plan. He contacts the doctor via a small comm device in his ear. The doctor has been listening to villain radio. Compress suggests they use a high-end to attack, but the doctor refuses. Tomura reveals he wasn't about to rely on the Nomu and follows up with 2 questions. Where's Dabi, and how long will it take for Gigantomachia to awaken? They still have over 2 hours until Machia wakes up, and Dabi is in a convenient location. Satisfied with the conditions, Tomura asks the doctor to warp them all to Aichi. Spinner is concerned that they're charging into a trap, but Tomura plans on using the Liberation Army's numbers to wear down Gigantomachia's insane stamina. Tomura returns Jin's mask and says the Liberation Army will never know what hit him. The League of Villains arrive at Aichi and are guided into Deka City by pro-hero Slide and Go. As they walk through the abandoned town, Tomura realizes that the entire area has been turned against them. They meet face-to-face with Koku Hanabata and Chitose Kizuki, 2 top executives of the army. Koku signals the Metal Liberation Army's revival celebration to begin, and dozens of warriors attack. Tomura views Koku as a mini-boss despite being a well-known politician. The leader of the Hearts and Mind Party reveals Giran is in the tower with the Grand Commander. 2 citizens rush Tomura with their quirks, but he turns them to dust in an instant and leads his squad toward the tower. As the battle continues, Tomura begins to feel the exhaustion from his month-long campaign against Gigantomachia settling in. Stumbling through an alleyway as his surroundings blur, he suddenly has a flashback to his childhood when his sister found a photo of his grandmother Nana. When he asked her why she showed the photo to him, Hana cheerfully replied that despite what their father said, she was still on his side. Tomura muses that despite having no memory of this, the emotions of the event still remain, and he laments that the flashbacks only show him fragments of his past instead of his whole history. Just as a swarm of liberation warriors charges at him, Tomura flips himself onto a wall and grabs one of the soldiers by the face, causing a chain reaction that disintegrates all of the soldiers simultaneously. With twice his clones causing a distraction, Tomura is able to reach the tower and destroys it with a single touch. Seeing that someone survived the drop, Tomura realizes he was the leader and finally comes face to face with Redestro, who he recognizes from the Detnarat commercial. Tomura taunts Redestro on his army's dwindling numbers and asks him where his bravado when he called the League went. However, his foe activates his quirk and increases his size while Tomura stands unfazed and charges him while his quirk destroys his surroundings with his footsteps. Unfortunately, Redestro seizes Tomura's hand and starts to snap it, severing 2 fingers for its part and killing many of his subordinates. While being held by his foe, Tomura is taunted, but when Redestro unknowingly starts destroying the hands on Tomura's suit, this triggers Tomura's instincts, allowing him to be able to decay part of his hand by using only 2 fingers. This phenomenon surprises Redestro and causes him to throw Tomura away immediately. Tomura was taken aback by his new strength and how his feelings were stirred by one instant, and starts to remember more of his childhood. Tomura soon dashes towards Redestro, who is surprised at how he's far more nimble and quick than he was back at Kamino, and as such far more dangerous. Resolving to end the situation, Redestro decides he's done playing around and proceeds to bulk up his body at 80% liberation, causing his body to contort and bulge until he becomes more demonic in nature. He then releases his super move, Stress Output Burden, that tears through several city blocks in an attempt to kill Tomura. The resulting attack sends Tomura flying. However, Tomura manages to survive as he touched and destroyed the attack. Tomura takes the preserved hand of his father out of his pocket and tells Redestro that he's right about him, that he truly exists only to destroy. The commander of the Metal Liberation Army replies that he must die then, because it's impossible for there to be a future without creation, and bulks up even more all so he can destroy him. Tomura only asks him who needs a future, since he will bring it crashing down. This only serves to infuriate Redestro, who prepares to attack while Tomura begins to remember when he was Tenko. Tomura finds resolve in those that helped him become who he really is. Tomura then breaks away from his past trauma by crushing his father's hand. With memories of his past returning, Tomura decides to break free of the shackles of his trauma and deems the hands unnecessary. As Redestro attempts to finish him with 100% of his stress meta ability activated, Tomura retaliates and disintegrates Redestro's energy tendrils with ease. This nearly destroys all of Deka City, crumbling most of the surrounding buildings entirely. Tomura mocks his foes by telling him that he understands the latter's motives for destroying whatever bugs him for fun. Redestro begins to panic as Tomura moves towards him with intention. After rebuffing Tomura's claim, Redestro proceeds to summon his Claustro armor to amplify his stress. Now armored, Redestro prepares to use 150% of his power, in which Tomura doesn't seem fazed at all. Tomura gleefully unleashes his full power with nothing holding him back anymore. His attack causes Redestro to struggle as his Claustro armor begins to break apart with no effort. Redestro soon deduces that Tomura must have a limited range for him to counterattack. He then attempts to end the battle by launching missiles at Tomura, but failed to notice the effects of Tomura's quirk has gone beyond its limits. Tomura laughs triumphantly with a desire to destroy anything that stands in his path. The overall attack causes Deka City to finally meet its end, while Redestro is forced to evacuate decaying armor but plummets straight to the ground with nothing supporting him. However, Redestro barely survives but is forced to cut his legs off with a piece of his armor to prevent decay's effects from spreading on his body. A wounded Tomura approaches Redestro and tauntingly tells Redestro that he recalls the reason this battle happened was due to the latter challenging him to a fight. Trumpet, Spinner, and the remaining MLA soldiers arrive on the scene. Trumpet commands his soldiers to attack Tomura, but Tomura intimidates them by giving an icy cold smile. Tomura watches Redestro hold off his subordinates to avoid bringing about more meaningless casualties. Redestro admits that his people weren't following his will, but rather Destro's command. He then realizes that Tomura's leadership skills are better suited to lead his MLA army. With that being said, Redestro surrenders and lends the MLA strength to the League of Villains. Everyone remaining on the battlefield watches with astonishment as a spectating Gigantomachia finally acknowledges Tomura. Satisfied with Redestro's decision, a victorious Tomura asks him if he's had enough money to get the League some lunch. In the aftermath of the battle, one of the hands is revealed to have survived the destruction, and Tomura took that hand to wear as his trademark mask. Later on, Redestro holds a ceremony to the members of the Metal Liberation Army where he formally bestowed control of the army to Tomura as the Grand Commander. Tomura only remarks on that his new coat is itchy, while Redestro announces that Tomura will be aided by 9 lieutenants, consisting of members of the League and Liberation Army. The alliance becomes known as the Paranormal Liberation Front. Tomura then speaks up that names are decoration, as what only mattered was the change they bring. After the speech, he dismisses a submissive Redestro and collapses to his knees from his injuries. Tomura then talks with Daruma, noting he exceeded his expectations with his victory, and the latter agrees to aid him. Endeavor Agency Arc. While his followers organize the forces for when he makes his move within 4 months, Tomura goes to Ujiko's lab for a special surgery that will make him more powerful. Daruma asks Tomura why he wants more power, considering that his quirk, Decay, has become so powerful that he's literally destruction incarnate. Tomura replies that he'd promise him more power if he met his requirements. Also, he wants to use everything he has at his disposal to obliterate the drags All Might left behind. Daruma likes Tomura's proclamations and explains the situation. Thanks to the surgery he will perform on him, he will obtain a suitable body to control a power much greater than that of All For One, to the point he can even obtain One For All. However, Daruma also assures Tomura that the medical process will last 4 months, and he will endure 4 months of hellish agony. Clarifying the situation, Daruma begins to operate Tomura's surgery for the next few months. Paranormal Liberation War Arc. A month after Tomura started the operation to become more powerful, he was seen still going through it, with it being extremely agonizing and gruesome as Dr. Ujiko had assured him. The doctor was impressed that the process seemed to be going better than he originally planned, as he excitedly cheered Tomura on from the sidelines as numerous tubes and wires were shown sticking out of his spine and head, while a bigger mechanical tube operated on his midsection which had been completely torn open, all accompanied by copious amounts of blood. Despite the painful process, Tomura was fully conscious throughout it, laughing madly. Less than a month before his surgery was completed, Tomura had been relocated to a large tube underneath Jaku Hospital, with Ujiko overseeing the completion of the process while using a clone of him created by Twice to handle everything else. Unbeknownst to them, the heroes had managed to figure out Tomura's location, as well as learning that Ujiko, real name Kyudai Garaki, was an ally of All For One. They proceed to carry out a grand operation to raid the hospital, as well as the other Paranormal Liberation Front hideouts. When the heroes launched the raid on the hospital, Dr. Garaki ordered Johnny to warp him and Tomura out, only for the Nomu to be crushed by Mirko barging into the lab. Kyudai desperately begs Mirko to stop her assault, but the rabbit hero ignores him as Tomura's operation reaches 74% completion. She manages to partially destroy his tank with a swift kick, followed by Present Mike managing to destroy most of Kyudai's equipment with his loud voice, including the rest of Tomura's operation tank. This releases Tomura's unconscious body at a 75% completion state. Exless then restrains Tomura's body and notes that he isn't breathing and his heart has stopped. While unconscious, Tomura experiences a facsimile of his warped past. Tomura explores the illusion and encounters many visions of his deceased family members that he accidentally murdered. He also encounters his father, Kotaro, the man who was responsible for his unintentional quirk awakening. Tomura then destroys the fake illusion of Kotaro, only to see a shadowy abyss swallowing everything up. Tomura walks forward and realizes that the man standing in front of him is an illusion of All For One. Tomura walks forward, but visions of his family, including Nana, try to stop him from falling into darkness. Unfortunately, Tomura coldly destroys the remaining bits of his humanity away, and accepts All For One's empty embrace. Once the vision ends, Tomura snaps out of his subconscious dream and finally awakens from his deep slumber, now possessing All For One's quirk. Tomura comments that he feels cold and unleashes a powerful decay attack that quickly disintegrates the hospital, spreading beyond its limits. He manages to disintegrate many bystanders, including heroes who stand within his path to victory. Once Tomura finishes his powerful decay attack, he realizes the massive destruction he caused by observing the ruins of the hospital. Tomura notices that thanks to the doctor's upgrades, he has full control over how he wants to use his decay quirk as he picks up the doctor's phone. Tomura contacts Gigantomachia and requests that he gather all the PLF members as they're going to destroy everything standing in their way. However, before Tomura can leave, Endeavor appears and prepares to fight All For One's successor. Tomura is forced to engage with the number one hero as the latter unleashes Flashfire Fist, Hell's Curtain, which traps him in a scorching inferno, but manages to withstand its burning effects using his newly received super regeneration. Tomura also takes note of how he's regenerating his wounds at an incredible speed. Endeavor tries to knock down Tomura with another attack, but misses. He ends up grabbing his arm, but Tomura blasts Endeavor away with a blast of air that sends him sailing. Tomura quickly leaps into the air as he heads out in search for Izuku's location for their fated clash. Tomura finally catches up with Deku, accompanied by Katsuki, and reaches his hand out to him and demands that he give One For All to him. Gran Torino interrupts their brief conversation by dragging Deku and Katsuki away to safety. Ryukyu follows up by flying up to Tomura and attempts to swipe at him with her claw. Tomura catches Ryukyu's claw, believing she'd be disintegrated by now. However, Tomura discovers his quirk isn't working and gets swatted aside in the process. He then realizes Eraserhead was responsible for disabling his quirk upon witnessing the latter's arrival, commenting that it was cool of him to try and stop him. While in the air, Tomura pulls out his communicator and orders an unknown client to kill anyone on sight before engaging in combat against Endeavor, who is trajected towards him with help from his sidekick Kido. Ryukyu points out that Tomura can't use his quirk due to Eraserhead disabling it. Upon reaching Tomura, Endeavor unleashes a large blast of fire straight at him, but Tomura dodges to the right, though his left arm gets burnt. Ryukyu flies towards Tomura, only for the latter to slam Endeavor right down at her, causing both to plummet to the ground. A triumphant Tomura stands victorious on the ground and throws a victory pose similar to that of Endeavor's to mock the Flame Hero. Endeavor tries to blast him again but fails as Tomura swiftly dodges his flames. Tomura notes that since he gained control over decay after waking up, he tried to control it so it wouldn't spread to the Nomu capsules, but acknowledged that not all of them survived. Recalling back to Kyudai's words, Tomura reveals that he managed to activate the remaining near high ends thanks to his use of radio waves, which caused an electric surge that awakened these creatures. Once the near high ends begin to counterattack against the heroes, Tomura dashes towards Eraserhead, intending to take him out due to him being a hindrance to his plans. Before he can reach him, Tomura suddenly gets tackled back by Deku and Katsuki, both intending to finish off the symbol of chaos once and for all. Deku holds onto Tomura with Black Whip while Katsuki launches his AP machine gun. Tomura easily shakes off Katsuki's attack, likening the explosions to fireworks, and tells Katsuki that he's no longer on his radar before trying to kill him. However, Endeavor strikes Tomura with a flame-imbued fist and sends him flying. Tomura rushes towards Deku to try and steal One For All, but as he does, the voice of his master starts to leak out of him, calling Deku Little Brother, which confuses the two of them. Though grateful for his master's aid, Tomura declares he will become something greater than All For One, and destroys the image of his master in his mind. While doing so, Gran Torino strikes Tomura with a kick, and the hero tries to evade the villain's counterattack, but Tomura's increased speed from pushing past his limits allows him to grab Gran Torino's leg before he brutally impales the hero through his chest. After this, he tries to go for Eraserhead to get his powers back, but before he can, Ryukyu holds her claw out and stops him while Deku comes in from behind and restrains him from his Black Whip. Deku declares that he'll never forgive Tomura, while the villain rebukes that he'll never forgive anyone and elbows Deku in the stomach. As Tomura is held in place, Endeavor prepares to land a final blow with everything he has, though the heroes are unaware that Tomura is in possession of two of the quirk-destroying bullets that Dr. Garaki created. Tomura digs his hand through Ryukyu's hand to try and throw the quirk-destroying bullets at Eraserhead and Endeavor, but Deku attacks with his Wyoming Smash, dealing terrible damage to the villain. Despite the hero's formidable power, Tomura viciously bites down on Deku's arm and throws the two bullets. Katsuki manages to destroy the bullet aimed at Endeavor, but the other bullet manages to hit Eraserhead in the leg, forcing the hero to amputate it in order to preserve his quirk. Tomura once again comments on just how cool Eraserhead is. Despite all this, Tomura uses this opportunity to execute a shockwave that allows him to break free of Deku's grasp, rushing toward Eraserhead to finish him off for good, managing to grab a hold of his face. However, just then, Shoto arrives and launches him back with an ice attack, while Deku lands another smash attack on Tomura. Despite their attempts, Eraserhead finally succumbs to his wounds and passes out, with Tomura regaining all of his quirks and managing to regenerate his damage, pointing out the futility of their efforts and stating that destruction is all that awaits them. While Tomura appears to be fine, the strain on his body and the incomplete stabilization begins to take its toll, and a large gash appears across his chest. Tomura wonders why his body isn't healing itself with his super regeneration quirk, and he confusingly asks Deku the date. Then, the regeneration quirk begins to heal the damage, and Tomura decides to end the fight with a massive wave of decay. However, Deku uses Black Whip to grab all of the heroes while simultaneously unlocking Float, allowing all of them to escape the attack unharmed. In the air, Deku safely drops all of his allies to the ground while deciding to fight Tomura by himself since no one else is able to keep the villain off the ground. Deku relentlessly pummels Tomura with 100% smashes, and the villain is unable to properly counter due to the stress put on his body from the previous fight. He attempts to find a way to fight back and finds a quirk that can eliminate Deku, but his inexperience using All For One makes it difficult to find the right quirk. As Tomura is hovering in the air, Endeavor appears and restrains him before unleashing his prominence burn, severely burning Tomura. While he's weakened and on the verge of death, the vision of All For One reappears in his mind and tells Tomura to lend his body. Tomura seemingly relents and the villain unleashes his Rivet Stab quirk, releasing tendrils that stab Endeavor. Under All For One's control, Tomura sends those tendrils to try and stab Deku as well, but Katsuki, who had also gone up alongside Endeavor, pushes Deku out of the way and takes the force of the attack. Tomura tries to tell his master to stop but finds it difficult to resist. Speaking through Tomura, All For One remarks on the pointless blood spilled and that Katsuki's sacrifice was the most pointless of all. Deku, driven with overwhelming rage, bites down on the tendrils and tells Tomura to take back what he said. Tomura uses the opportunity to grab Deku while he's close, gloating about how One For All is finally his. Deku is then brought into a mental landscape where he notices the vestige of All For One trying to merge with Tomura. Tomura tells his master to stop interfering, but All For One retorts by saying his disciple needed his help, and without it, he would have burned to cinders or died from the impact of the fall. Tomura still refuses, reminding his master that it's his dream and that he's running the show. In the mental landscape, the vestige of Nana appears to aid Deku. All For One tells Tomura to notice his grandmother, and is silent as his master begins to explain about the consciousness embedded in quirks and his ability to interact with those consciousnesses. Tomura then remembers the image of his grandmother when he was younger, as well as when she appeared along with his family in his mind before, and declares that, even despite everything that happened, he still hates her with all his heart. Tomura proceeds to launch a decay wave while his master applauds him for using his hate to empower him. Enraged by his master's interference, he attempts to destroy All For One as well, though he's unaffected, not minding that Tomura is starting to hate him, since it's more fitting for the symbol of terror. Then All For One's brother Yoichi appears in the mental mindscape to help Deku and Nana fight against Tomura and All For One. The symbol of evil urges Tomura to combine their strength to steal One For All, while deriding Deku as an unworthy successor. Yoichi rebukes his statement, commending Deku's drive to help others and allowing Deku the final push to overcome the villains. The two opponents are sent flying away from the impact. As Tomura is falling, All For One explains to his disciple that he was unable to steal One For All due to his interrupted stabilization and not having fully integrated into his body. He tells Tomura to retreat and allow his body to heal itself so he can fight on another day. Despite these warnings, Tomura ignores All For One, using the Rivet Stab tendrils to stop his fall and keep him stabilized. All For One continues to tell him to retreat, but Tomura angrily states his master isn't the boss of him, as he attempts to fight in spite of his injured state. Suddenly, his tendrils are destroyed by a wave of energy released by Nejire Hado, who arrived at the scene alongside Ingenium. Tomura reforms his tendrils and mocks how many little maggots are crawling around. The villain resumes the fight and attempts to fight the heroes with his black tendrils while he tries to slowly heal himself. And as this happens, Gigantomachia finally approaches his master after having torn through multiple cities to aid in his battle. Gigantomachia retrieves Tomura from Shoto and Nejire-chan's super moves, saving him from certain death. Though knocking him unconscious, Tomura is placed on his back where Spinner tries to tend to him, asking him to order Gigantomachia to do something. Suddenly, Best Jeanist arrives on the scene and uses his quirk to pin down Gigantomachia and the League. Spinner is ensnarled with Tomura and realizes that Gigantomachia needs to have an order to do anything, so he desperately pleads Tomura to wake up. Tomura temporarily wakes up and orders Gigantomachia to destroy, to which the latter vigorously agrees and begins to tear his restraints. Before Gigantomachia can break free, however, Endeavor uses his quirk to fly up to his face and punch him back. As the giant starts getting up, the sedatives the UA students force-fed him starts kicking in, robbing Gigantomachia of any strength and forcing him to sleep. Mr. Compress acts fast and compresses a part of his body to make his escape. He orders Spinner to wake up Tomura before compressing them both and making his way to the top of Machia. While in the marble, Spinner notices Nana's hand all burned up, and recalling the moment when Tomura claimed they fed his rage but at the same time made him at peace, puts it on his face right as Lemillion and Best Jeanist's cables are about to grab them. Tomura finally awakens and uses radio waves to blow Lemillion, Best Jeanist's fibers, and all the other fighting heroes away, while the near high-ends turn to face Tomura. However, it turns out All For One is now in command of Tomura's body. He has the near high-ends arrive to rescue himself, Spinner, and the compressed Dabi and Skeptic before making their escape. Spinner tries to question Tomura about leaving Mr. Compress, Gigantomachia, and Himiko Toga behind, but All For One tells him that since Tomura has been defeated by Deku/One For All and Endeavor, several heroes attempt to give chase to the villains and the Nomu, but are unable to. Deku uses Black Whip Froppy style to jump into the air to confront Tomura / All For One last time, as All For One tells him they will meet again once Tomura's body is perfected, blowing him away as Deku screams out to Tomura. Tomura / All For One and his allies proceed to escape the heroes by dispatching 3 of the remaining 10 near high ends to distract them. That evening in the forest, All For One, still in control of Tomura's body, remarks that the heroes won't get a tomorrow, or a chance to get a moment's rest, since it's his turn to lead. He then orders his tireless Nomu to invade Tartarus to free his real body. The All For One possessed Tomura and the near high ends proceed to raid Tartarus, destroying the mainland gate as they make their way to the main facility. As they make their way over on a flying Nomu, Tomura starts to wake up and attempts to regain control over his body. All For One tells him to rest due to the super regeneration quirk still needing time to heal his body, but Tomura rebukes, saying he told him to rest in the first place, though All For One says he will after he finishes what he came for. He demands his body back again, but All For One reminds him that this power is exactly what he wanted, to spit at the hand that didn't help him, and now that he has it, what does it really matter? Tomura says he doesn't want to be his pawn. All For One claims that he's wrong. He's becoming the next me. Regaining full control over the body again, All For One uses Decay to destroy several towers, and discovering the location of his main body uses Search, comes up with a plan utilizing dual EMP attacks inside and outside the prison, shutting down the power and allowing the rest of the inmates to break free and cause more chaos. All For One, in both Tomura and his original body, faces the villains, saying that if they desire freedom, they must submit to him, adding that the impeding Void era will give rise to a more perfected Demon Lord, and that this will be the story of how he will become the greatest Demon Lord of all. That night, All For One takes command of a series of aircrafts, utilizing the freed prisoners and the near high ends to raid several other prisons to cause even more chaos throughout the country. In their new hideout, All For One in Tomura's body asks the remaining PLF members to watch over his body while he rests until the body is complete. Spinner responds sullenly, telling All For One he is not the one he chose to follow, but All For One insists he has the best intentions for Tomura's wishes and that once his body is perfected, their desires will be achieved. Did you enjoy our video? Be sure to check out these other great videos from the Amagi, including a bunch of other My Hero videos that I did. And make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to be notified about our latest videos. I'm Adrian, thanks for watching, I'm out.